Well, hello again, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Greg Duque. I'm co-director of the Veterans Advanced Energy Project and a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council Global Energy Center. Today, we'll be talking about leading in clean energy, technology, and innovation. This issue is central to our mission here at Veterans Advanced Energy Project. We empower veterans and military spouses in advanced energy careers. You, our audience of veterans and military spouses, are well suited for advanced energy because you understand that energy can be a limitation on our ability to project power, to shoot, move, and communicate. You also understand that innovations in energy and economizing on energy can be force multipliers on the battlefield. So let me quickly give you an example that many of you will recognize from your experience. In March of 2003, the commander of the U.S. Army's 5th Corps, General William Wallace, was again reminded of the timeless axiom that amateurs talk tactics, but professionals talk logistics. His massive and powerful armor formation, the main effort against the Iraqi Republican Guard, was operationally paused. The general feared that his thinly protected lines of communication were compromised by deliberate targeting from the Saddam Fedayeen, and that his thirsty 1st Armored Division and 3rd Mechanized Infantry Division tanks would lose access to their vital fuel convoys from the port of Kuwait. As the world watched, media and political leaders were starting to turn the situation a quagmire. Abreast of the 5th Corps, the future Secretary of Defense was leading the 1st Marine Expeditionary Forces attack. To maximize momentum and the endurance of the division's vehicle columns, James Mattis, then commander of the 1st Marine Division, lightened the loads of individual Marines and minimized the number of mechanized vehicles. Mattis put his faith in the 3rd Marine Air Wing's ability to defeat Saddam's formations surrounding Baghdad and accepted the risk that his force might not achieve its objectives before running out of fuel. In later testimony, Mattis reflected back on the compromising situation of the march up, as it came to be known, as well as on the cost of increased fuel demand during the counterinsurgency efforts underway in Iraq and Afghanistan. In the future, Mattis stated, the military must be unleashed from the tether of fuel. Jim Mattis had seen the future imperative to change our sources of energy and economize energy consumption for military operations. Yet, as you know, deploying advanced energy systems in a combat operating environment is challenging. But by training folks like you to design, engineer, manufacture, and operate advanced energy systems, we're not only taking a big step to unleashing our military's ability to maneuver in combat, but we're also creating useful skills for businesses at home. So with that as pretext, allow me to introduce John Gillis, Veterans Advanced Energy Fellow, Marine Corps veteran, and now the Energy Risk and Resilience Analyst at Argonne National Labs. John?
Sir, thanks so much, and thanks for such a terrific opening. My name is John Gillis. I'm a Veterans Advanced Energy Fellow with the Atlantic Council Global Energy Center. And as Greg mentioned, in my professional capacity, I'm also an energy resilience researcher with the National Preparedness Analytics Center at Argonne National Laboratory. I'm really pleased today to be joined by a distinguished group of experts as they discuss DoD microgrid installations and the linkage with veteran workforce development opportunities in advanced energy. And I'd also like to thank GC Green for their partnership in organizing today's discussion. Before we get started, there's going to be a few housekeeping notes from me. When our panel discussion concludes today, you're going to have to join one of 2 breakout sessions. The first breakout session is going to discuss veteran workforce development. The second one is going to focus on project and technical management for microgrids. Both of those sessions are listed on the agenda feature in the event app right below this session. We encourage you to click on the link associated with the room you wish to join, and I will tell you when to do that. This event is on the record. We're currently live streaming on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. We encourage you to post about what you hear today and share on social media using the hashtag Vets Energy Week. If you would like to participate in our conversation, we encourage you to submit questions in the Q&A portal at the bottom of the screen anytime during the event, and we'll incorporate them as appropriate. So with those now out of the way, I want to turn just quickly to give an introduction to this panel and then introduce each of our speakers. What our focus on is today is looking at microgrids, DoD microgrids, as an opportunity to advance both deployed and domestic energy systems. In particular, there's been a lot of great work in this group looking at how we can train a workforce, especially in a way that they can deploy those skills, bring those skills back, and then continue to use them to provide energy resilience at home, both on DoD installations and off them. So we've got a tremendous wealth of experience on this panel that's able to address that. I'll quickly introduce everybody, and then we're going to jump into a video to start. But we've got today with us Mick Wasco, the Director of Utilities and Energy Management at Marine Corps Air Station Miramar. Nate Johnson, who's the Director for the Laboratory for Energy and Power Solutions, and also a professor at the Polytechnic School at Arizona State University. Jerry Davis, Program Manager at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, Innovation Partnering and Outreach Directorate, and Liz Perez, the President and Founder of GC Green, and as I mentioned earlier, our wonderful partner on this panel. So we're going to start off here with a video about the Miramar installation microgrid, and we're going to use this installation microgrid and some comments by Mick afterward to really set the foundation for our discussion today, to square up on what it is that we're talking about when we say an installation microgrid. Then we can use that as our launch point to have a broader discussion about workforce development and how we can learn from installation microgrids and take those into the forward deployed environment that Greg talked about. So let's go ahead and roll the video. Thanks so much.
Electricity as a utility is something that's extremely vulnerable because it's completely interconnected around the United States. Our goal is to not rely on that infrastructure, but have a redundancy that gives us resilience as an air station to respond to any sort of emergency where we would be out of power. We're able to power the base for up to 21 days based on on-site renewable and conventional resources. The renewable energy sources that we have on station are mostly from methane gas at the landfill. We also have it from solar, and we also have battery storage.
Millions could have lost power in rolling blackouts across California.
During the heat wave, we were able to support the grid by turning on our microgrid, and we were able to directly contribute to reducing the number of rolling blackouts that we're seeing in the region. The microgrid here has enabled other military installations that are working on these technologies to reduce dependence on fossil fuels and conventional resources.
Hi, everybody. Mick Wasco from Marine Corps Air Station Miramar. It's great to be here. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the microgrid and hopefully set the stage for the panel discussion here. All right, sorry about that. Okay, so just a couple more images of the renewables, which really where we start on base. Miramar is unique because we have the City of San Diego landfill just south of our air station. We tapped into that directly with a 12 kV electrical line. So this generation from the landfill, which is renewable, contributes directly towards energy resilience for the Marine Corps. Also on base, we have solar power in very distributed forms in carports, rooftops, etc. So really what we're talking about here is utilizing those resources in a microgrid. We've been working on this project for almost 10 years now, and excited to tell you about where it's at today. But it all started with a concept design from the National Renewable Energy Lab. We have Jerry Davis here on the panel from NREL to talk about that. We can talk about the technical stuff in the breakout room, but really what we we're able to accomplish is find out what other energy resources we would need to build to have energy resilience on base. That was programmed into an FY14 Energy Milcon, known as the URSIP program today. And that project is now complete and operational. This is a photo of inside of our power plant that we built. You can see here that the engines are these small teal things at the bottom, but the equipment above it is rather big. That's the after treatment system in order to clean the emissions. The emissions out of this plant is somewhat cleaner than the air in LA sometimes, which is kind of impressive. We designed it and built this way so that our system could actually support the grid. We did a study with the Air Pollution Control District in San Diego to understand what we would need to build so that we can support the community. The microgrid was funded and built in order to have energy resilience, which is basically if you have no utility power from our local utility, San Diego Gas and Electric, we can self-sustain our internal grid through island mode, where we essentially island ourselves from the grid and provide 100% capability to the flight line. But economic mode refers to us actually using the system to save money on our utility bill and also strategically help the grid in times of need. In June of 2020, during COVID, I would say, we were actually able to prove out the first and foremost important functionality of the system, which is island mode or using it for energy resilience. This was a commissioning process that started in December of 2019 and culminated in this testing in June, where we islanded the entire base off of our microgrid system and successfully integrated landfill power. We are able to do multiple stress tests to show that the system can actually maintain critical loads when we lose distributed energy resources like the landfill power, or even one of the diesel generators from the power plant. We proved that we could maintain critical loads and shed non-critical loads to maintain the system. Then the story gets even more exciting when in February of 2021, we did a live demonstration during a operational exercise called Winter Fury, where the 3rd Marine Air Wing, it was basically in its highest tempo of the year doing operational training. And we did this microgrid event where we cut power to the base on a normal workday. I guess I should have mentioned that all of the testing done in June was on a Saturday during COVID, so there weren't that many people around. This exercise is known as an Energy Resilience Readiness Exercise, and mandated by OSD, these exercises are the forefront of creating more energy resilient bases and installations. In addition to that, there is the heat wave that's been going on in California. So after June, starting in August of 2020, the California saw rolling blackouts for the first time in 20 years. And proud to say that we had our system built and ready at the time so that we could help support the grid. And what was unfortunate is at the time, there was no program set up to compensate us for that support. And now looking at the system we have, or now looking at the California Public Utilities Commission and the governor's office, they've put out multiple emergency demand response programs, one called Emergency Load Reduction Pilot, and another program that just came out last week, CSEP, California something emergency program. Sorry, I can't even remember the title, but this situation is changing so much so quickly in that we're realizing that the grid is becoming much more dynamic, and we have postured ourselves to help the grid. The problem, and where the story kind of, where we sit today, is we have one microgrid operator who's learned how to use our system. And we're now being called upon by the state multiple times per month to help assist in demand response. And we need to do workforce development in these systems. I think veterans is a great place to start. There's a lot of skill on the operational side that needs to
the Miramar project. And I think as a Marine Corps veteran myself, I spent 4 years on Camp Lejeune, and 4 years in which I really didn't think about installation energy at all. But once you start looking into these projects, you realize very quickly how hampered we'd be operationally if we didn't have the energy that the installation provides. And I think that was actually made very evident a couple of years ago when Camp Lejeune was hit by a fairly significant hurricane, and it sustained a lot of damage. So in addition to, I think, just natural disasters, there's also exposure and concern increasingly about potential adversary threats to electric systems as well. And it seems like the system that you all have built at Miramar is designed to be resilient to both of those. And so I'm curious if you can talk about a little bit why resilience is so important on the installation and what sort of operational needs you make sure that you're serving by developing a microgrid like this.
Yes, so the microgrid is basically designed to be a redundancy to the utility. A lot of people ask what's the difference between backup generators and the microgrid. Well, backup generators back up critical systems or components of the mission, but not the entire installation. Our system is set up to where we can prioritize and power areas of the base, maybe not the whole base all the time, but entire areas, at a minimum, the entire flight line and all supporting facilities. It's important because if anything were to happen within the U.S., because I think we're all realizing that the U.S. is no longer a sanctuary, we will be able to use the full force of the capabilities at Miramar in the event of an emergency. If there were some sort of an emergency event, a FEMA event, our commanding officer can actually invite people in to, run logistics out of our base and support the entire region. These concepts, I think, are why we are doing this. And the stage that we're at and the tone that I would set is we have built the technology and it is in place and it's proven and we've done it. But having the people and the redundancy in the manpower to be there in the event of the emergency when it happens, I know that our system with all of our resources combined can operate for 21 days. But right now we have one microgrid operator and some supporting crew that I don't think we could take them away from their families for 21 days. How do we integrate the uniformed workforce and also veterans into this situation so that we build that resilience through the workforce?
Terrific. And I want to take the note that you made on technology, just saying the technology is installed. I'm curious, because NREL played such a critical part in helping to design the system. If we could turn to Jerry real quick and talk about why advanced energy systems play such an important role in systems like this, and sort of what the future might look like on installations for including those in other installation microgrids as well.
Sure, John. Yeah. Mick said it well. The grid is becoming more dynamic, and you could apply that statement to power systems of all sizes. The bulk power grid, the national power grid, definitely. At the installation level, it's becoming more dynamic almost every day, meaning that there are new technologies being deployed. We tend to refer to them as distributed energy resources, DERs. So that includes renewables, hybrid energy systems, battery storage, different storage systems. And the pace of the innovation there, it's exciting because it's moving fast. And these are presenting new opportunities for improved resilience in terms of on-site generation, as opposed to dependency on off-site sources. But it's also introducing new challenges. So in the controls area, how do you manage these sometimes intermittent resources, and then more of them, right? If I've got five different power sources at a site instead of one utility feeder, that's a controls issue. And we haven't mentioned cybersecurity yet, but at the end of the day, we can have a resilient energy system that can functionally stay online in terms of having on-site resource availability. But if it's not secure, then the whole purpose is defeated. So you bring all those together, and there are a lot of emerging technology areas that are going to keep emerging and need to. And we're testing these principles at military installations. But I know we'll talk also about the forward deployed space. You know, we've got to prove out the concepts at our installations, make them as resilient as possible. Bases like Miramar leading the way. Mick and his team are doing the heavy lifting that other installations will learn from, and forward operating bases will also be able to learn from to be more independent and resilient. So it's an exciting time, but yeah, the pace of the energy evolution is fast. So it's something that we're trying to support the military in terms of proving it out, getting the operational confidence, and then deploying it as much as we can.
You mentioned there, again, I think a little bit about the need for folks who are able to work with these technologies and manage them, especially as we have increasingly complex systems. Mick mentioned this as well, a big challenge with workforce development, which is ultimately what we're focused on here. We're going to come back in a second and talk about that operational energy piece as well. But I'm interested to turn to Liz quickly to talk about the work that she's done to bring veterans into this space, in particular because I think we've highlighted here a number of ways that managing an energy system like this ends up really becoming a mission-oriented activity in the same way that it feels like when you're in the Marines or another service branch. And so Liz has done a lot to bring veterans into this space, I think, for that reason. And so Liz, can you talk a little bit about why veterans are such a critical component and a great match for this kind of work?
Sure. Can you hear me okay? I know it's a little loud here, but let me go ahead and go right into that question. Yeah, you know, it's not a question so much if veterans are capable of being in a space, or, you know, why should we? You know, it's more of, you know, that's like a question I would say probably about 10 years ago, 11 years ago. There's a lot of veterans in this space, actually, within clean energy, and then particularly as we transition more into utility scale projects. And, you know, I'm just really excited to have been a part of this project on the workforce component of it with the Clean Energy Commission, and being a part of particularly the Miramar Microgrid project. And, you know, when it first started out about 5 years ago, I think this project particular really opened up that question of what jobs are there that are essential to run the microgrid, and also taking a look at how do we define what is a microgrid job, right? I get asked that a lot. And part of that is whether that's energy management systems, installing solar, maintaining solar, and also taking a look at different controls for HVAC systems. And then you're talking electrical and a lot of different things, whether that's also designing, engineering, and particularly, I think what we're faced with here, there's a high demand right now within DoD and locally, especially here in California, where we have a lot of critical things happening. You have the rolling blackouts. We have, unfortunately, a lot of our wildfires, California wildfires happening, and we're going to need that backup energy, the backup storage, and all of these areas, actually particularly into pool room spaces out in actually the Sierra Nevadas. But for this project particularly, it's important to ask, how do we scale up the jobs that are needed? So there's going to be incentives that need to be in place, some type of training programs, also workforce component programs, also to incentivize employers to want to hire and provide on-the-job training. There's a lot of areas there as well, and then taking even a closer look at it, made in America manufacturing, so we can manufacture a lot of these components that make up clean energy jobs and the jobs essential to building more utility scale projects. So these are the, I think, the questions that we need to really focus in on.
Liz, thanks so much for that perspective. And I think, one of the things that you highlight there by bringing out notes about workforce development and finding a way to get veterans into this space coming out of the military opens a question about, well, is there a way that we can train folks in the military to use this knowledge and then take it out afterward? And I know Nate has been doing a lot of terrific work on deployed energy systems for a variety of reasons. That to me introduces an interesting opportunity, because we know, as Greg mentioned to start us off here, that deployed energy systems are going to be particularly important in the future operating space. We can assume there may be some similarities or some learning value from working on those systems and generalizing back to installation microgrids. And so it serves as an interesting workforce development opportunity that both provides value within the service and then for service members afterwards. So Nate, I'm curious if we can turn to you and talk about, what do the similarities look like between a microgrid here in the US and then a microgrid that might be forward deployed, and what are the opportunities there to work across those lines to train on both?
That's perfect, John. Thank you for that question. And for microgrid training in general, obviously the energy transition occurring globally is happening rapidly. There's forward operating locations, refugee camps, or electrification occurring in tens of millions of people per year. There is also a variety of work occurring domestically in terms of resilience, reliability, and increasing amounts of renewables. And all of that push, all of that momentum and demand signal needs to be met by people like us that are participating or on the panel, providing opportunities to individuals looking to meet that demand signal, which I would say at a holistic perspective, the globe has an insufficient amount of supply of great engineers, managers, operators, and technicians to actually execute on that demand signal. So right now we're kind of trying to catch up to the wave of the change of the energy economy. As a result of that, about 4 years ago, we started to support veteran career transitions that used to be aircraft mechanics, electricians' mates, naval nukes, and a variety of other professions on transitioning to the civilian energy profession. And we started volunteering for a couple of years until we got to a capacity of about 300 to 400 veterans per year. And at that point, we didn't have the capability to meet that demand signal. And so that's when we started to go seek additional support to provide tailored training programs that are given to specific installations, more generalized training programs for energy facilities managers, and then also crossed into GS as well as uniform services. So as we were creating these training programs and mapping them as well to professional credentials. And so you have your military credential, your academic credential, and your professional certification, which provides you very high value as an individual. And then your stepping stone is into Siemens or Arizona Public Service, or potentially as well back into military, but as an ununiformed individual. So what we found, borrowing from the experiences that we're working on in a variety of international spaces, to conclude the other part of your question, John, is our standpoint is that electrons behave the same, whether you're in Arizona or Algeria. And so we can teach some of the same fundamental principles, but often the beneficiaries have slightly different ranked order of preferences. Obviously, always safety is first, then reliability, affordability, and sustainability. But how those systems are configured, if they're isolated, if they're grid connected, if the grid is weak or not, are we talking about an expeditionary operation that needs to have the capacity to move and be mobile? Are we talking about situations that may be light loaded, so we're taxing the generators in ways that we wouldn't like to be? And then how do we enhance maintenance practices to maintain those systems? How do we improve loading conditions where we match the actual end loads to what the generator power profile can provide? So we're increasing energy efficiency, reducing fuel use, and then also hybridizing those systems, which is where a lot of our work is now, which reduces the use or need for additional backup generators and uninterruptible power sources or UPS which reduces the cost and at the same time enhances resiliency for other off-grid or on-grid operations. And we're seeing increasing amounts of that. And again, the coupling of microgrids with also load control or building automation, which are often two separate pots of money. And so by looking at those together, you can increase the stacked value of what you can achieve, and often at the same time, from a budgetary standpoint, hit those goals with reduced CapEx and operating costs. Back to you, John.
Hey, that's terrific, and we have a question that's directly relevant to what you were just discussing from Jerry here, who says, "Show me where to apply and train." Nobody speaks about leading the horse to water, and this is exactly, I think, what we're trying to reach here. So, Greg, we're going to turn to your question about other microgrids in a second, but Nate, if you could talk in detail about some of the specific work that you're doing and where Jerry might find some resources, that'd be fantastic.
Perfect, thanks, Jerry, and I'll provide the link in the chat. We do an online self-paced training format. We do online real-time training format across the world. We do hands-on in-person training at Arizona State in a 1-acre microgrid test bed with about 50 assets on-grid, off-grid. And then we also do a remote hands-on training at installations, at events, and other locations. And those are only increasing this next year. So in the link that I provide, and then you can send me a note, we have between 2 to 5 trainings a month on energy resilience and then cybersecurity. And then we also do customized trainings depending on the demand signal. And excellent, Jerry. It looks like you're in Arizona, so it looks like we can catch up for coffee as well.
So I want to turn now to Greg's question here, because Greg asked an interesting question, which is, given the success of the Miramar project, why don't we see more of these projects? And I think Mick is a terrific person to answer that, and then we'll go to Jerry right afterward as well.
Yeah, so Miramar's really lucky. You know, we ran through circumstances where there was a BRAC in 1990s from Navy to the Marine Corps. And there was a lot of electrical modernization by a really, really good electrical utility engineer who modernized the infrastructure at Miramar and basically paved the way and set the groundwork for a microgrid system. We use all of that existing equipment that was built 20, 30 years ago now. A lot of bases have not been modernized. So when you talk about building microgrids on other bases, everybody's starting from a different spot. And I will also say that there are a lot of microgrids, but you might just not know about them, especially in the Marine Corps. 29 Palms is doing a lot of great stuff with the existing generation that they have, including a large amount of solar PV. Paris Island out on the East Coast has one of the most advanced microgrids that was built in one privatized project called an ESPC. Where they basically rebuilt their entire infrastructure for $90 million in a very, very smart way. They took what I did in 10 years and did it in 2 or 3. So there's a lot of stuff happening, and it's all very unique. In MCAS Yuma in Arizona, they have a microgrid system that's operated by the local utility, which is a good format for some bases and also a good opportunity to look at. But the other thing that I would say is just that I'm actually losing my spot at what I was going to say next. So I'll turn it over to Jerry and get his perspective, because he probably sees a lot more out in the DoD than I do. I just know my Marine Corps brethren.
Sure, yeah, thanks, Mick. And yeah, I didn't really mention it in the intros, but that's my role at NREL. We're a Department of Energy lab, but I spend all my time working with the military and how to leverage DOE, Department of Energy capabilities and investments for DoD. But with that, yeah, we work with a lot of bases. And it's a great question. Greg's question is something we ask every day. Why don't we see more projects like Miramar or the others that Mick mentioned? So there are a few, but a lot of it comes down to the funding, the economics. Nate mentioned kind of funding streams, you know, whether it's for building efficiency and controls or on-site generation. These don't always line up, and resilience doesn't have a formal value assigned to it. So everybody here can say, yeah, totally understand why is that important and why does that matter? But without a dollar figure, you know, somebody at the end of the day got to say, well, this is how I justify this project. And if I can get utility power at a certain rate. Oftentimes, renewables can be more expensive. The cost points are improving hugely. So in terms of like skills that are directly applicable to what we're talking about now, a lot of it's in market analysis and understanding those breakpoints when renewable systems will be competitive or already are competitive. Anyway, so I'll just summarize that. Economics is a barrier for a lot of the bases.
Jerry, I knew that you would cover for me when I lost my thought, but you brought it back. The concept of the energy program in the DoD started on cost savings. All of the contract mechanisms that the government put in place for us to do energy projects were all based on the concept of paying for themselves. No other program in the DoD has to pay for itself. So energy got started on the wrong foot. Miramar was forward thinking enough to, in the beginning, have the mindset on energy security. Energy security was the term 10 years ago. Now we have a much more cool version of that, which is energy resilience, and everybody's talking about it. But none of the contract mechanisms, none of the authorities, or none of the programs are set up for resilience. They're all moving in the right direction now, but we had a late start because everybody thought that energy was something that had to pay for itself and didn't really see it as a critical part of the mission. Now that we have that mindset, we're going to be able to set out and do good things.
I see here several questions related to questions about, well, why are these so successful, particularly on the West Coast? And one question here gets to the policy environment. And I think that that's also an interesting thing to bring forward, because it is the case on these microgrid projects that in some sense, installation microgrid projects sometimes benefit from state policies or state programs. They also obviously benefit from federal policies and programs and DoD policies and programs. But the states can play a really integral role here. They can also play an integral role in workforce development. And so Liz has been doing, I know through GC Green, a lot of work with the California CEC. And Liz, I wanted to bring you in to talk just briefly here about what the CEC is doing and why you think that might serve as a great template for how states can better support programs like this across the country.
Sure. So, I want to say about 8 to 10 years ago, actually even 5 years ago, there was a lot more of the on-the-job training programs that were designed particularly for projects like this in the clean energy space. And what I have not seen lately, and maybe folks can chime in, I haven't seen anything really lately. A lot of those WIA dollars, the workforce development dollars, I believe they're just not as rich as they once were. And I'm hopeful through this administration that we can definitely see more of that and probably even, more robust, especially coming out of COVID-19, more robust programs for clean energy, because as you can see, there's definitely a need to develop more of these type of jobs, not only for energy security, but again, for a lot of the natural disasters that we're faced with. And one thing I want to throw out there, so yes, policy does matter, absolutely. And that's why we see a lot of these projects develop here in California. I'm not really that sure on other states, but I know in terms of California, we are the head of the game when it comes to energy resiliency, and we're focused a lot on this clean energy movement because it's absolutely important, because you take a look at where we are as a state and a lot of the threats that we have here. It's important to also recognize a lot of the tribes. I'm Mono Indian, I'm from Norfolk Rancheria, and a lot of the tribes, they would love to do more of these projects. And if you take a look at tribes in general, we have a lot of the land space in order to do that. However, there's also policies that block tribes from, unfortunately here within California, and they are addressing this, but policies that do put barriers there to where tribes can't build a lot of these utility scale projects. And I'm hopeful that Governor Newsom and his team at the California Public Utility Commission, they can work on that to enable tribes to become also more energy resilient and resilient as a whole as a tribal nation.
Liz, that's a great note to bring in here. I think because it also highlights an opportunity for, as we develop a workforce, for folks to go to continue to work. A lot of the work that I do at Argonne National Laboratory right now deals with small islanded electric systems. A lot of times these are in rural parts of, for example, Maine or Alaska. And so they have similar challenges that we might have on an installation. And I think it poses an interesting question about how whether a veteran workforce, which is developed in the service, used to deploy advanced energy systems, comes out with advanced training there, and then can go really support those communities, whether that's a training pipeline, that's something that's feasible and promising. So maybe I can turn back to Nate here and get your thoughts, Nate, on what does it look like for the many opportunities for folks to go once they have this training set? Are they confined to DoD installations, or are there a whole lot of places they can go?
Yeah, I love that question. That follows quite well from Liz's remarks. Is the way that we format and execute on training sessions is that we train managers, engineers, operators, and technicians. So those 4 categories of individuals. Those individuals map to professional credentials or standards. Each track has anywhere between 40 to 100 hours of training. This is on energy resilience. Cybersecurity is separate. And that transition for them could be to the civilian workforce. We have, an increasing amounts of demand for distributed energy technologies, enhanced resilience, the economics of resilience. We've had people graduate as engineers and then actually go off to be technical analysts for firms that advocate for policy change of how do you create the mechanisms that facilitate private capital to have benefit to public areas. And that's kind of what Mick was saying earlier about changes within the local CPUC policies and regulation that better credit the value of microgrids. And so these individuals go from a variety of circumstances. I would say about 5% of the veterans would go back to the workforce. So then we also to the military workforce, which is why about 2 years ago, we gained some additional support from DoD to focus additional training efforts on GS existing and then also uniformed individuals that are on base to have more direct benefit to installations. The other thing I'd briefly say is what's interesting is that you take a look at forward operating locations, and in working with the Marine Expeditionary Force, they occasionally get involved in circumstances where they need to repair and maintain civilian infrastructure, which is well outside of their training set. And so at ASU, we're at Williams Air Force Base, which is Bracton, I think 93. And so we actually train on civilian infrastructure in addition to military infrastructure. The other value of that is a variety of folks who go through our programs are also involved in disaster response techniques, exercises and efforts, Caribbean, Pacific, and elsewhere. So yeah, professional, civilian, military opportunities, and then as we're all looking to help and increase resilience around the world in volunteer and disaster response activities. Back to you, John.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. I think, we're getting to the end of our initial time here, and then we're going to split out into 2 panel discussions. And so I want to give a second for everybody to go around and give some last comments while we're all in the room here. But as we've discussed, there's, I think, an emerging story that we can look at here, which is we know that we're going to have advanced energy needs within the service. We know that we're going to have advanced energy needs without the service. And this gives us an opportunity to develop a workforce that learns a lot of its skills while it's in the service, deploys with those skills, becomes a vital component of the deployed environment, and then brings those skills back, gets some additional training, and takes those out again in the same sort of mission-oriented way to help other communities. And this is a really exciting opportunity, but it's not really, that ecosystem isn't really robust and available yet. And so I just want to give everybody the chance to say, if there's one thing that you think here we need to focus on if we want to make that vision come true, where would you see that, and what could we do to address it? So maybe let's start with you, Liz.
Sorry, I was a little loud here. Can you repeat that real quick?
Sure, yeah. So I'm curious to get your thoughts, on this sort of ecosystem where we can train some folks in the service, have them come out and bring those skills out to the broader community. Right now, we know that that would be a great pathway, but we don't have that really available yet. And we're curious what your thoughts are on one hurdle that might exist and how we could address it.
Well, that actually is the hurdle, is like, where are these microgrid jobs being built, right? And in taking a look at that, and I'll just mention, as I mentioned before, tribes are building these utility scale projects actually in San Diego County. There's what we have going on in San Diego is something called community choice. So we're actually weaning our way off of San Diego gas and electric, so consumers can have that choice of where they're going to get their energy. And in taking a look at the tribes in San Diego banding together to become their own utility. So we're at that beginning stage now. And what I would like to see is a lot of military transitioning into these jobs, and kind of like your MOS school or your A school, where you're in classroom and you're doing it, and then you're out in the field and you're installing it. So we have that going on now. There's backup battery storage, there's solar, cool rooms, whenever these rolling blackouts occur. I mean, there's just so many different components that go into this, and even looking at designing it just from, taking a look at a dirt road property and seeing what can possibly go into that, and getting creative. And what I think the best part about this is not only, are you, yes, served in uniform as active duty, but you're able to serve again in the community, because you're doing something that directly impacts people in a positive way. And some of the, communities that we're serving, particularly in this text, within tribal land, you have some of the most impoverished tribes. People think of tribes as having a lot of resources, financial resources, but there's actually a lot of tribes that don't, and even underserved communities as well, and making that direct impact and providing affordable energy. And I think that's really important as well, in addition to creating jobs.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Liz. Jerry, let's go to you quickly.
Sure. Yeah, it was mentioned earlier. The homeland is no longer a sanctuary. That's a quote, excuse me, from the 2019 National Defense Strategy. As awareness grows of the critical importance of installations and the resilience and the overall abilities and capabilities of the military, then I think the military will realize there has to be a better training pipeline starting from within, because those skills can transfer to the ability to maintain the readiness of installations as a key component. So I think, John, you had even mentioned it, you kind of took it for granted while on active duty, the lights stay on and hopefully the building's heat stays on, but that importance of the critical loads and the capabilities and keeping those operational, that awareness is growing. So continuing that dialogue, which has just recently started, really keeping that moving, I think will help to establish some of the training pipelines that we're talking about.
Awesome. Mick, maybe let's go to you, and then Nate, if you could bring us home.
Yeah, I was going to say, Jerry always takes my thoughts. I was going to say very simply, the link between our installation energy and operational energy has been a bureaucratic problem within the DoD. There's two separate commands: the operational side, the breakers and killers, and then the installation side, the people who just sit back and serve them. On the energy side, there is too good of a connection between what happens out in the field and what needs to happen back here. And I know that the operational folks in the DoD are focusing on energy education, and that curriculum is starting to be embedded into the program. And I think that's going to help solve the connection between all of these initiatives. And I think with the education and initiative and leadership around energy, it's going to bring this stuff to fruition. Us personally, we're working on some microgrid transition funding opportunities to try and basically transition these technologies instead of researching them. We've been researching them for 20 years. Let's start to transition them.
Terrific. And yeah, Nate, we'll go to you.
Perfect. Thanks, John. So if, one thing I believe that's useful to note is that if you take a look at the growth trajectory and scale of where microgrid's at today in global installed capacity, it's similar to where the solar and wind energies were 15 years ago. And so at that point of time, most of the companies in the energy space were not creating capable individuals by sending them through standardized training programs. It was much like a corporate ventures practice, if I could think back to my private sector experience, where you take capable individuals in your organization that can pick up new skills, train them and give them the capacity to excel. And so therefore, the earlier stages of microgrids didn't have a significant amount of open job ads because these large organizations were simply promoting within or training within because they were walking into an uncertain or risky space. And if you add uncertain capability and people to that, that doubles down or increases your risk profile. And so as a result, you take capable people that you know and can execute and give them additional things and put them into spaces that are unknown to your corporation. Now that we're getting point to that the demand signal is again exceeding our capability of supply, we're starting to see a variety of ad hoc training programs. And now we're training about 1,000 people a year in my program. We're still not even close to being able to meet the demand signal. So if anyone out there, particularly the panelists who we've done training programs with and co-delivered and co-developed some, we need more of these discussions and we need more groups to come together to help standardize and scale. And there's no way that separately we can meet that scaling requirement. And so doing it together, differentiating our capabilities and skill sets from generalized to specific, and then providing experiences where we can also address some of Liz's remarks where how do you take people and put them in like vocational or apprenticeship programs that give them that credential experience. The certifications don't exist for like a microgrid operator. We typically pair that to like a NERC operator, for example, but a microgrid technician is it similar to a solar PV technician. You also need to do batteries. And so there's that, the job requirements aren't as definitively laid out and agreed upon in the industry. So I'm hoping that through these discussions and through partnerships with more people here, we can help standardize, and through that standardization, we can then more easily and effectively reach scale. Back to you, John.
Nate, thanks so much. And everybody, thank you for such a terrific conversation here. We mentioned at the beginning, we're going to jump now into 2 breakout sessions. Liz and Nate are going to continue our conversation on workforce development in another room. And then Jerry, Mick, and I will talk a little bit more in terms of technical detail about the Miramar project and how those projects may be implemented other installations as well. You should see both of those available in your conference app right underneath this. So we're going to go into the breakout session for today's discussion. On the event app, you're going to click the associated link with the breakout session, Veteran Workforce Development or Project and Technical Management, and looking forward to seeing you all in the breakout sessions.